Okay, we're going to be learning a Maamar in this week's Parsha. Matis Masa is this week, and this is a famous subject. The Umikneh Rav talks about the large amount of cattle that were for the tribes of Reuven, Gad, and at the end, they were given to stay on the east side of the Jordan River, today known as Transjordan, and they were joined by the half of the tribe of Manasseh. Now, so we're going to discuss, the Rebbe discusses, this is again a famous idea that's discussed in many Maamar from the different Rebbes, the famous Umikneh Rav of the Rebbe Rashab. And we're the question is like this: Umikneh Rav, so there was a tremendous abundance of cattle, was Livnei Reuven, Livnei Gad. The tribes of Reuven and the tribes of Gad had accumulated a lot of cattle. And this is after the Jewish people conquered Sichon, the east side of the Jordan River. That's where they were waiting on the Yarden Yerechai to go into Yericho and with the passing of Moshe, the passing and the leadership of Yeshua. So it says, Vayira, and they saw the land on the east side of the river, and it's a place that was good for cattle. Vine Maamar Umikneh is a good place for the cattle to graze and to be raised. So they come to Moshe, they asked that Moshe, the Jewish people conquered the lands of Sichon and Og, and they asked that they should get that land and they should stay on the east side of the river. The question is, of course, what would the plan had they not stayed in that land? Would they just have abandoned it? So it seems like it wasn't a crazy concept for them to stay there. They want that to be their portion. Al Taverenos Yarden, we don't want to pass the Jordan. It means we understand the east side of the river. Okay. Now that remained until pretty much they were the first to be exiled. There's three major exiles of the first temple. There was the Bnei Reuven and Gad, the east side of the Jordan went first, then the 10 tribes on the north went second, and then of course Yehuda. Talking about in general exiles, and then Yehuda with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So they said they don't want to cross the Jordan. The Heish of the Moshe al Divrei Techacha. Moshe heard this and he gave him a whole Techacha, about he admonished them. Baskir, he reminded them, it's Maisim Raglim. You're doing what the Raglim did. You're doing what the spies also didn't want to cross over. And then he gives them a condition. If you're going to cross the Fnei Hashem, you're going to cross over. You're not going to disheart the people from the battle. Like it says, they stayed the 14 years of the battle and 14 years of the division, which was extra. And wait, and they're going to be there. Beroish, the Bnei Gad were known as tremendous warriors, as we learned. So they're going to you're going to be ahead of the conquerors, and you're going to participate and then some. Then you could come back and live on the east side of the Jordan. That again, snake was part of the Jewish people's history for the whole time of the judges in the first temple. From this understood, from the fact that Moshe, the way Moshe responded, was like a trigger for Moshe, with a soft spot. So seemingly that Moshe heard in what they were saying is similar to what the spies said, that we don't want to go into the land. Only after they agreed tonight to the condition, Moshe, the Moshe conditioned with them. But Amr, and they said, we're going to go in first, and we're going to go in battle. And then, how you say in then they changed. Moshe changed his attitude towards them and allowed them to stay. There's a lot of ideas in the Umikneh Rav, on the famous Polish Revart, that they made a kinyan in Rav. They knew Moshe wasn't going to cross over. They didn't want her to stay with Moshe. They didn't want to leave Moshe alone on the other side of the Jordan. The Rebbe explains like this. You've impacted them to understand why was it initially what they said wrong, and why after Moshe admonished them and they accepted the conditions, was it because it turned out that Moshe gave into them. But once they explained their position and accepted Moshe's condition, so then it turned into something that the Rebbe says in Yonotzi, it turned into something desirable. And like I said again, seemingly there had to be a strategy for the east side of the Jordan. It wouldn't have been strategically safe to leave it empty for the nations to come back in and be on the borders of Eretz Yisrael. So if you want to understand this, I'm a word with the Maamar Umikneh Rav. Like I said, this is a Maamar that's already brought down with Yosef HaTzaddik, Gad and Reuven, and the Rebbe from the year Tov Reish Chaf Tes from 1869. Api Mashakosef Rabbeinu Azokim, based on the teachings of the Alter Rebbe. Understand where they were coming from, what Moshe had to bring out within them to turn it into something positive. We first have to examine the whole concept of why were the forefathers and the tribes, why were they shepherds? Why did Avram and Yaakov preoccupy themselves with being shepherds, and then the Shvatim? The reason is brought down. They wanted to be separate from the world. To be a shepherd is an easy job, right? David HaMelech was a shepherd, and he wrote the Tehillim. So to be a shepherd is an easy job. To be in his is to be separate and to sit there, do minimal interaction with the world, and be able to stay and to be in a spiritual space. That's a good vocation. It's a good job to be able to stay connected to Hashem. He close avoid the Torah mitzvahs. What does it mean avoid avoid Hashem, to serve Hashem? To serve Hashem properly in the way of Torah mitzvahs. If they had to pick a job, they didn't want to be a job that was preoccupied. They wanted to be a job that would allow for isolation, for privacy, for study, for his bindiness, contemplation, and hitbonenut, and getting close to God. They didn't want to be involved in the world because the world would confuse them and the world would interrupt what they're trying to accomplish in the world. It's not to be involved in the world would be an interruption, would be a bilbul, confusion. And this reason, starts, and that's the same reason that the spies didn't want to go in. They said, we're living here in the desert. Their claim was, when we go into Eretz Yisrael, it's a big descent. Let us stay in the desert. They had no preoccupation with the world, with the outside world. They were a generation of intellect. For them, it was satisfying. It wasn't like they were lacking. They were an intellectual generation that stimulated themselves from study of Torah. The Torah was only given to those who ate the man. What does it mean, those who ate the man? Those who didn't have to work. And they had all their other needs. That was ready. Miriam drink. They had Miriam's well. The clothing were taken care of and pressed by the clouds. They didn't have really physical idea of food. The food came from heaven. The clothing were cleaned and pressed and grew with the cloud. So it's not Gashmis. It's not real physical world. They were scared. They didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. Going to Eretz Yisrael meant we have to get involved. I don't want to get involved. I want to be isolated. They don't have to go into the world, into physical world, and engage in the worldly things. Not because there's a purpose. They understood there's a kavanah to go into the world. Because going to the world, you have to mevar, you have to engage and then separate and elevate the physical. But they didn't want to have to do that. They said, let's just stay as an idea and study the concept. We live in the physical world. We're just not involved in the physical. Cut off. It's a famous line. What did they say? One of the times, what does spies say about Eretz Yisrael? It's a land that consumes their own. It eats it eats its inhabitants. What does that mean? It eats its inhabitants. We're going to get spiritually lost. We go to the land of promise, the land of opportunity. We're going to get involved. We're going to forget about Torah mitzvahs. Derech Agav, it wasn't like they were talking concepts that didn't happen. The Rebbe spoke. We learned to talk. The Rebbe spoke. 1951, when the Rebbe spoke in Pasha Shlach, the Rebbe says that it is Eretz Achelas Yishva. It is a land that consumes its own, and the only way you could be successful there if you go to Koyach of Moshe. If you don't have the bittul of Moshe, or you disconnect from externally, you disconnect from your consciousness of Moshe Rabbeinu, it is Eretz Achelas Yishva. It is a land that consumes itself. A person gets lost. You get lost. We've seen it in our history. Lands of opportunity, lands of engagement on the side with the Torah mitzvahs. And the Jewish people experienced that themselves during the time of the judges, during the times of the first and second temple, to a certain extent. They were concerned. Instead of them being victorious and winning over the physical and elevating it to holiness, things could go wrong. And instead of them bringing up the Gashmis would bring them down. Once they start the taste of the good life, the free life, you start one thing, and slide, and then as we all know, things can happen. Let me read that. They don't want to have a descent. He said we'd rather be in a safe space, in the desert, in our protected space, and we'll learn Torah, and we'll be a beacon of light from where we're sitting. Why do we have to be engaged in the physical world? And what did Kalev say? That's not the kavanah. I get it that like everyone's spoken of Fabringen. There spoke very strong words in Fabringen. He says he was talking the third party. He was talking officially about the Rebbe, but obviously talking about himself as well. That we sent shluchim, and there were sometimes people were sent on missions and they fell, and that was bad. But we didn't stop sending because this is the kavanah. Same thing. What did Kalev say? Ha'aretz ma'od moed. You want to get to 2 times ma'od, like we learned in the Sikha a few years ago. Parshas Vayetze. You want to get to 2 times ma'od. It has to come with being involved in Gashmis. You want to get to double ma'od. You don't want it just to be good, but you want it to be really good. This is the kavanah. Is you have to go into the physical world. There's no other way. You have to go out to the world, to the ground, to the earth, to the land. The galis bechinas ha'toiv, you have to reveal the potential of what it is, not be scared of it. And again, not that we're saying that it was false fear. They had what to be scared of. And there were trips and there were fallings and there were worse. But that's still that's not the kavanah. The kavanah is to go in there and find and show the good that's in the world. You can only get true elevation if you descend. No risk, no reward. No investment, no return. And he could say, what do you mean? I did have a Yerida. I did have a descent. I was up in heaven. Heaven's B'chlal another existence. I came down to this world. I have needs, I have physical needs, right? That's it. I don't have physical needs. I have physical needs. I have gashmis, I have to eat, I have to sleep. But I could do it in a protected space. The Rebbe says that's not enough. The fact that your soul comes down to your body and an animal soul, that's not enough. You have to be Isaac in your chelka ba'olam, your place of this world. The Meraglim also, like we learned in the Torah, the world of thought, the world of Machshava, that's also, this idea comes up and up again in Chassidus. We learned it in the Maamar. It says, what is very strong term? Why does Leah say Yaakov hates me and he loves Rachel? So the Alter Rebbe explains, he hates the world of Machshava, he hates the world of concept. The world of Machshava is the ideas. You struggle with ideas versus struggling with reality. Rachel is the world of realities, the world of Maisa. Leah is the world of Machshava, of thought. Or even in the world of speech, but it's still not the world of action. You have to go into the physical world. It's not enough to stay in the world of concept, to talk about ideas of engagement, but you have to actually engage. But and only when you actually go into the space and engage in the actions, you get to the double ma'od. So when the sons of Reuven and Gad again came up with the same idea that we want to stay as shepherds, let's stay on the east side of the river. Moshe was hearing the same narrative of what the Meraglim were saying, that they don't want to go into the world, they want to stay on the east side of the river. It wasn't exactly like the tent, like the Meraglim, it wasn't exactly like the clouds, it wasn't the man that they weren't going to have. But it was basically that they didn't want to engage. If we have sheep, we have cattle, we're going to open up yeshivas, we're going to open up places over here, we're going to learn over here, we're going to be cut off. We're going to have our own zip code. When they agreed to Moshe to go in and fight in the land, they're going to die or have at least the self-sacrifice to go into Yisrael. The Rebbe is going to explain this further in the Maamar. That if you start off, means the Rebbe says there is always going to be the idea of types of people. There's Yosef Oyo, and there's people who go out to the world. There's Yisachar and Zevulun. They're always going to be the people that are out more engaged. There's the business people, and there's the people who sit in yeshiva and koilel. But the Rebbe is saying, if you're able to show, and as the Rebbe explains, that Bnei Reuben wanted to go back to the Yeshiva to be the place of just taking care of the sheep and singing songs to God. But the fact that they were able to go in, that primarily, that when it came to the point of importance, they were there to do the ma'aseh. But primarily they just wanted to live out. That's okay. To be a little bit, to be isolated primarily in that, but when engagement is required, you're there and you're available and you're there in the front lines. I'm not going to get into the questions that are going on nowadays in the politics and Israel, but there's something along these lines where we have to at least, no one's arguing with that. There has to be Talmidei Yeshiva and there has to be Mekoil, but there has to be clarity that it's not a total divide, but you have to show the Mesiras Nefesh that you're there for the times that count. But that's another subject. I don't want to cross into that subject. So there is Gimel. And sounds said a little deeper. At the end of the day, what was the difference between the sons of Reuven and Gad? That it was okay what they did to the way the Avos, the fathers, and the Shvatim, the tribes were. We don't find that God made a condition with Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, with the 10 tribes, the 11 tribes, besides Yosef, that they had some sort of condition like the Bnei Gad and Reuven. They were totally cut off. They were shepherds. In order for them to be able to stay as shepherds, they had to first the condition that they're going to be able to, that when it comes for the battle of Eretz Yisrael, they're going to be there. When it comes tachlis, when it comes to their numbers needed in the war, they're going to be there. It wasn't alone for them to say it on their own. It wasn't, if they would have come and say, Moshe, we want the other side of the river, don't worry, we're going to come fight. No, they had to hear Moshe's admonishment. Moshe's admonishment was a part of the process of the transformation, of transforming from being negative to positive. Roy Yisrael, the shepherd of the Jewish people, Moshe, only when Moshe admonished them, and in the way he admonished them is able to transform or direct what they were trying to do to make it positive from initially being negative. Yuvan Behegdim will understand is the explanation that we talk about the difference between the Avos, the forefathers, and why would they roy it sign? We bring it down that there's a mention over there also. What's the difference between Yosef and the Shvatim? Here the Rebbe is going to say a revolutionary idea because sometimes it explains that there's really two levels. There's the level of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. There's the level of the Shvatim. There's the level of Yosef. Here the Rebbe kind of puts the obvious and the Shvatim in one category and Yosef in another category. Let's see it inside. What was the difference in Yosef and the Shvatim? The Shvatim stayed in the family business. They were all shepherds. Shechem, and here they come to Egypt to say, by the way, I'm not getting out to talk critique, but the fact is that when they came down to Mitzrayim, they got involved, and there was an assimilation. I mean, they kept certain basic things. They didn't change their names, they didn't change the language, their clothing. But halal of the Rambam. The Rambam talks about the tradition of Torah. Aside from the tribe of Levi was lost. Meaning to say that with their concerns, the reason why they had to stay isolated was some sort of a justified concern. So he says, what was the difference in Yosef and the Shvatim? The Shvatim were in the family business of being shepherds. Mashayk and Yosef, the Rebbe says two things we find. We never find that he was a shepherd. It wasn't like he was a shepherd before. And then they stole him from his father. He kidnapped him and sent him off to Egypt. He was never. They were all there, and he was by his father. Either he was learning Torah, or he was in Egypt. But the fact that he was a shepherd, we don't find that in his career. You could say because he was young, but that's technical. He was by his father. Then when he goes down to Mitzrayim, when he comes to Petifer's house, so he doesn't have a job as a shepherd over there. He becomes in charge of the house. And whatever is in Petifer's business is run by Yosef. Yosef becomes the most important person. He becomes the chief of staff of Petifer. And even later he gets thrown into prison. As it's explained in the Maamar around Yosef. Yosef goes in charge of the prison. He becomes the warden as the chief of staff. And then when he becomes second in command to Paroi, the whole Egypt has to run under Egypt. So Yosef was always running things within whatever the space was. He comes to Potiphar, he's running Potiphar's house. He comes to prison, he's running the prison. He comes to Paroi, he's running the country. He becomes so important to Egypt and the society of Egypt that no one could lift their hand and foot without Yosef's permission or guidance. The whole of Egypt. He was mamish involved in the worldly things. He wasn't some spiritual guide. He ran the country, the finances, the gashmis of the country. The physical country is run by Yosef HaTzaddik. He didn't have to be a shepherd. He never was disconnected. He was able to be totally connected to the Eibishter. At the same time, he was totally engaged in the job he had to do. It's famous line the Rebbe says that Yosef recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. One of the answers given, what do you mean they didn't recognize him? Rashi says because he didn't have a beard, but also Splatan, they didn't recognize him because they didn't recognize the Savoida. How could a person be a viceroy of Egypt and stay from? They didn't understand how that's possible. He said, you want to stay from, you have to stay cut off. You have to live off in the fields of Shechem somewhere and be a shepherd. To be the viceroy and to be Yosef HaTzaddik, they couldn't recognize such a concept. The Shvatim totally disconnected. From the world. They couldn't understand the concept of a person who's so involved in the world. Mamish running the whole Egypt, not just running Egypt. He created Egypt. Egypt became a superpower under Yosef. And at the same time, simultaneously, he's connected to God. That was a foreign concept to them, absolutely. But the truth was he wasn't connected. To godliness. And the Rebbe says, again, the circle concept. Because he was so connected, therefore he wasn't distracted by the world, which means he was more connected while he was in Egypt than they were in their isolation. It wasn't like they were more connected in their isolation. They just couldn't understand how Yosef could also be connected like them or lower than them, but stay from. No, on the contrary, the very fact that he was connected even in his situation means that he was connected even greater than they were connected in their isolation. They couldn't understand such a concept. They didn't recognize such a concept. They didn't recognize such a concept, such a high level of connection, godliness, that a person could be simultaneously connected and not be distracted by what's going on around them in the world while they're engaged, and not they're oblivious of what's going on in the world. It's not like Yosef was in the world, but he was oblivious of the world. He was involved in the world. He was creating what's going on in the world. He set the tone of what was happening in Egypt. And the good thing, the idea is Shashvatim, Agam, obviously, the Rebbe says the fathers too against them, but I have to assume that the Sikha just print ideas that the Rebbe didn't say. But the Shvatim and the fathers, they were only a low level of chariot, which is within the Seder Shtashlos. And in the low level of chariot, there's precautions. And if you're going to be involved in the world, you can't be totally dvekas Hashem. The world takes place. Therefore, you have to stay away from the world because you're scared of the world. The word is confusing. There's two lines, either here or there. There's this wordless Torah, and the opposite of Torah is the world. And if you get too close, it gets confusing. The Rebbe says even Yaakov, the most important of the fathers, he had a struggle when it comes to Esav. He struggled with Esav. He had to fight it out. Like two people that are struggling together. Because Esav's angel takes place, and Yaakov has to fight it out. That's like I'm not categorizing the guy at the level of Beinani, but that's what it says about Beinani. The Beinani has the battle. Esav's a brother to Yaakov. And that, by the way, that's what the Rashi quotes. Why do we have the Haftorah after in Vayetze that Yaakov was, the Esav was kash and Yosef was fire. Until Yosef came, Yaakov wasn't secure from Esav. Only Yosef could secure the Yaakov, Bnei Yisrael from Esav. Why? Because he's more powerful in theory. Because Yaakov had a battle. I'm just saying what the Rebbe says. Yaakov had a battle. Esav was like the fire that burns out Esav. And he's even higher than the level of there's Teyu and there's Tikkun and there's chaos and there's fixing. Yaakov is to fix Esav. Esav is really strong. He's a brother. He's beyond all of that. Sherish Esav Yaakov. Yaakov and Esav come from the world of chaos or the world of Teyu, the world of Tikkun and fixing. When Yosef comes from, there's no opposition. Therefore, when Yosef is born, then Yaakov is saved from Esav. Therefore, he could burn him out. Therefore, even while he's engaged in the world, again, not just participating, but controlling the world. He could be totally connected to God. Nothing in the world distracts Yosef. let's see if we should go further. Stop here. Stop here. I just want to say, other Maamarim, it says, and even the Rebbe explains that when Yosef had his dream, and it says that we're all bundles, and then we bow to Yosef. What they didn't like about the dream was if we're bundling it together, we don't need you. We're our own bundle. We took our life. That's a whole bunch of pieces of wheat all over the place. We put it together. We made our own bushel of wheat. What do we need you for? It says our bushel, as a bushel, bow to Yosef. Why? Because they were only up to the world of Bria, in the world of separation. They had to bow to Yosef to go up to get a higher elevation, the second Bria, to the world of Atzilus. In other Maamarim, it explains that the difference between the Avos and the Shvatim was that the Shvatim, the Avos were totally disconnected from the world. So they were shepherds in a way of disconnect. The Shvatim were shepherds because they couldn't be involved in the world. It means that here they're saying it, kind of putting it in a single category of both the Shvatim and the Avos. But there are other Maamarim where it explains that the Shvatim are way higher, and therefore they were totally disconnected, and the Rebbe has Sichas in that Yosef told us Yaakov Yosef, that Yosef is the one who goes further into the world than Yaakov, but that when Yaakov comes from Mitzrayim, then the famine stops. So there's a lot of different angles to this discussion. I don't want to let's just get focused on one, but we're learning this Maamar, and this Maamar, this is what the Rebbe says. All right, we'll continue with today's Monday. We'll start on Wednesday, Tuesday, tomorrow we'll learn the Rebbe's talk on Parshas and Shabbos and Varachim of from Tafshin Yud, the early years. Have a wonderful rest of your day.